Thucydides is known for the speeches and debates that appear in his work. We saw that Herodotus' work had the same feature. For Thucydides, the use of speeches is in need of explanation given the fact that some of these are rather lengthy, and it's difficult to imagine how someone could have remembered them for a long period of time and then later recounted them so that Thucydides could write them down. Even if he was a first-hand witness to them, it would be difficult for him to reproduce these exactly. So he adds a word of explanation about this. Quote, "With reference to the speeches in this history, some were delivered before the war began, others while it was going on. Some I heard myself, others I got from various quarters. It was in all cases difficult to carry them word for word in one's memory, so my habit has been to make the speakers say what was, in my opinion, demanded of them by the various occasions, of course, adhering as closely as possible to the general sense of what they really said." End quote. While he admits to taking some liberties in putting words into the mouths of the speaker, he doesn't regard this as a contradiction with his historical method. He attempts to reproduce the general gist of the speeches based on his sources, even though he doesn't have at his disposal a text with the exact words used. He acknowledges that due to his strict scholarly method, his history might not be as entertaining as some people might like, but he insists that the work was written for those interested in learning the truth about the war. Here, we must keep in mind again the two great models that Thucydides had before him, Homer and Herodotus. Both of these writers provide an abundance of amusing and entertaining tales to keep the reader interested. Against this background, it makes sense that Thucydides feels the need to defend his own method and writing style. In a passage often taken to be a critical allusion to Herodotus, he writes, quote, "The absence of romance in my history will, I fear, detract somewhat from its interest. But if it be judged useful by those inquirers who desire an exact knowledge of the past as an aid to the interpretation of the future, which in the course of human things must resemble it, if not reflect it, I shall be content." The words translated here as romance is to me mythodes, which means simply what is mythical or what is fabulous. Here we catch a brief glimpse of what Thucydides takes to be the goal of history in general. It should help us as a guide to future action. History runs in cycles and certain events come to repeat themselves. When we study the past, we can see the decisions made and the results they led to. When we find ourselves in similar situations in the present, we do not need to experiment by means of trial and error in order to find the correct course of action. Instead, we merely need to look to the past and follow those decisions that led to fruitful outcomes, avoiding the choices that led to disasters. The idea is that history can be used to help us interpret our present-day situation and can serve us as an advisor when we decide what should be done. In this sense, Thucydides' history can be used as a kind of textbook for future politicians or policymakers. Thus, the value and purpose of the new field of history, which Herodotus and Thucydides were pioneering, is given a justification. This is different from Herodotus' stated goal, which was simply to preserve the events of the past from forgetfulness. There's no claim in Herodotus that the information provided by history will be of any service to anyone. It will be noted that for Thucydides' idea to work, he must presuppose that human beings will act and react in roughly the same way through time. Thus, human nature must be a constant that can be relied upon for his history to have any value in guiding future action. Thucydides therefore makes a careful study of human nature as it shows itself in the development of the events of history.